So it's a really warm welcome to the Global Sports Channel today to Mr. Danny Crates. How are you, Danny?
I'm very good, mate. How yourself?
Well, I'm brilliant. I'm always good, mate. And I tell you what, I thought we'd start off by having a truth or scare. What do you reckon?
Yeah, go on then. Hit me with it.
So you were just telling me off air about your, well, let's say, passion, fascination, curiosity, love of Australia as a country, yeah, and all things Australian. So,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
so can you name the famous biscuits, chocolate biscuits from Australia? Do you know what they are?
The ones you put in coffee. It's their Tim Tams.
Tim Tams. Yeah, there you
I
go.
remember.
So 10 points for that one, mate. Everybody in Australia.
Other brands are available, right?
Yeah, everybody in Australia will be loving you now. Hey, tell us where you're having a chat to us from today. Whereabouts are you sitting?
I am sitting in my office stroke shed in the garden that is now my studio because we're not allowed to travel anymore and do what we love doing. So I do everything from this little place in the garden. And I've also got a 12-week-old baby. So this is my little escapism. I often tell my partner that I've got a really important conference to go and speak on. And although I've been caught out once, my 10-year-old come and caught me napping in the chair. So.
Well, I tell you what, everybody listening and watching in today, we're not going to keep Danny here for 3 hours so he can stay away from his baby. We're going to get him back to his family as quickly as we possibly can. But listen, thanks very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And, I was reading up all about you, and you're an inspirational guy, mate. You've done some amazing stuff, and I want to get into that today because here on the Global Sports Channel, we're talking to athletes and coaches all across the world, not only about their amazing journey in life, but also a lot of the things that we think we need to fix going on in the sporting world. But let's go back to the beginning. What got you into sport? How did it all start for you? What's the backstory of all that?
I think, like most people, because I've always got this. When I'm talking and presenting, and I ask the question, especially if I'm working with younger children, things like that. It's like, think of your most famous person, and it doesn't always have to be sport when I'm talking to children, because people have different aspirations in life. But whether it be sport, be it music, film, drama, I think for 99.9% of us, it comes from one place, and it's school. It's your first ever PE teacher, and then my PE teachers are the ones that introduced me to sport and then encouraged me to take the sports that I was showing an interest in and some kind of talent onto the next level, which was to go to my local clubs, which was my two sports at the time were rugby and athletics. So I joined my local clubs. And then when I joined the clubs, that's when I really got the passion for the sports. But there's a big part of it, and I'm sure we'll get to it, is I had talent back then to run, and I had talent to play rugby, and rugby was the one I really, really hooked into, but I never really worked with it. I had talent, I didn't do the hard work part that you need to be successful. But I think it does come back. It's that nurturing that you get at a very young age. And also I couldn't sit still, so the only teachers that weren't on my case constantly were my PE teachers. So I always sort of connected with them well. And actually, we did full circle because I had a book come out in 2012, and when I had my book launch, I had my first two PE teachers at the book launch. It was so cool to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, way back then, did you have dreams to, be an Olympian or do anything like that? Was there anything like that on the radar when you were a kid at school?
I mean, when I first did athletics, I grew up watching Sebastian Coe, Steve Cram, Steve Ovett. I know I'm only naming the British athletes, but I was British, so they're the ones I followed. And the middle distance races. And I remember when I was a kid, you used to get these badges as you do in many children's events, like sports and that. You get the next milestone, you get another badge. And I had a Union Jack badge from somewhere. It was nothing to do with any of the sport I'd done, and I wanted to put it on my tracksuit. I remember my mum saying to me, this is when I would have been about 11 years old, you can't put a Union Jack on your tracksuit, you have to earn a Union Jack.
Yeah.
And it never really resonated then, and I'm not saying that was the moment. But it was really, it was just about fun. And then I switched to rugby. All my passion was rugby. I played for the East of England. But as I just alluded to earlier, I just trained on a Tuesday, Thursday, went out for a few pints after training, went out on a Friday night and expected to play on the Saturday.
Yeah.
And I started in the career, got up to the first team. Our coach at the time was a former New Zealand All Black hooker called Hicker Reid. So
Hicker? Oh, Bayer Plenty boy.
You know Hicker?
Yeah, the old Bayer Plenty boy, Hicker Reid, yeah.
Well,
did he do the...
He was my rugby coach.
Did he do the haka for you at all? I bet you he did when he had a few beers in him.
Do you know what? I don't think we ever got him to do it, but he was a pretty scary guy. You wouldn't have crossed it. But he was a lovely guy as well, as you can imagine. And but I went off to Australia to go travelling, and he sent me off with two clubs, Sydney Old Boys. He had connections in, and there was another one that he was that I had links to that I could have gone out there and played rugby, but being a 20-year-old Essex boy, I come from Essex in England, which has a bit of a reputation. I went to Australia and I found pubs in Australia. Never made it to the rugby club, sadly.
I was going to say, actually, when you said that you're an Essex boy, I was going to say we could talk nightclubs and pubs for the rest of the show, couldn't we?
Yeah. The tour of Essex, yeah.
Okay, very cool. So did Hicker get you along to Twickenham to watch any of the All Blacks games there?
No, he didn't. I mean, I don't think he ever gave much away, Hicker, bless him. But my time with him was quite short. It was sort of pre going away, and then when we came back, he was the one. What got me back into sport was playing rugby again, and he was the one that coached me back into playing rugby again. So I owe him a lot. I owe my rugby club more than anything. I mean, they're the ones that really nurtured me back after losing my arm. But he never gave much away. Bless him. Cool.
So we talked a lot about Australia in the beginning there, and we have to go back to that now because it was such a defining period of your life, wasn't it, when you came back down under to do your backpacking trip? Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I had a fantastic year, and then being me, I managed to miss my flight home. Well, I didn't miss my flight home. Back in the old paper ticket days, I had a ticket in the bottom of my backpack, and I still remember I got the ticket out one day and realised I was up in Darwin at the time. I knew I was ready to go home. Checked my ticket, and I think I had about 3 days until the flight left, or till the ticket ran out, because you had a year ticket. But there wasn't a flight in that period of time because it was Air France, and they only flew like once or twice a week. So I phoned up Air France and just said, look, can I get on the next possible flight, like the one after? And they just went, no, your ticket's run out, mate. And that was it. I'd lost my flight home. So I then had to extend my visa. So I got like an emergency period on my visa, worked for an extra 4 weeks to get the money to fly home. And then literally a week before I was doing my last job, I was driving up the coast from Brisbane to Airlie Beach, actually, which is my paradise, my home from home. Yeah. Working for a backpack at the time, just delivering all the leaflets to the hostels on the way up, and making those connections for them so they could send their people up. And I literally got 60 kilometres from my end point. So I was in Mackay, or in Serena, just outside Mackay, which is up in the Gold Coast, up in Queensland, and then had a car crash. Just still to this day, never know what happened. Got so close to getting to Airlie Beach. Wow! There was a Jack Daniels waiting for me.
Wow! Did you? So you literally woke up in hospital, did you?
Well, I actually woke up in a ditch. The car ended up 15 foot down the embankment, and I still remember. I don't remember it a lot, but the bit I do remember is I came to, and I had a passenger with me. He was a guy I was working for, and I came to, and there was an arm sitting on my lap, and I thought it was from somewhere else. So I went into a bit of a state of shock because I thought somehow there was a body part in our car. And then he turned around to me and he went, "Don't look now, it's yours."
Oh shit!
Like that, and that was the moment I realised I was in a bit of trouble. And then I couldn't get out of the car because my side was ruined. So I had to climb out of his side of the car. He had gone by this stage. He legged it up the embankment. I climbed out of the car, and I had my arm in my hand. and I was just down this ditch, walking around like a headless chicken. And then luckily there was one house on the road, and they had heard it. And this lady come out called Kathy, and she just, according to her and her husband, just rugby tackled me, sat on top of me to stop me moving around.
Yep.
While he went and called the ambulance and everything. And then I was taken off to the local hospital and stabilised, and then from there moved on to Mackay Base, which is the major hospital, where they started the job of patching me up.
Wow, what a story. So here's a big shout out to Kathy, who I hope's watching the show today, and thank you for saving Danny's life, because it sounds like she did, Danny.
100%. I think if she hadn't been there, but I mean, losing an arm, it's not going to end well if you don't get fixed pretty quick. And so she, and it was the holding me down, really, stopping me from moving around and talking to me, like just calming me down. That was what she did more than anything. And I think in true testament to Australia as well, and the way they can work out there, because it's a small town. When the paramedics, the only thing I remember from the actual scene was the fire brigade came down and put me on a stretcher, or helped to put me on a stretcher, and then they smelled the petrol coming out of the car, and they just picked up the stretcher and ran me up the hill, but they took me up feet first, so I was sliding out the back of the stretcher, and I just remember all these hands trying to hold me onto it. But when the paramedics took me to hospital, because we went and met up with Kathy afterwards, my family flew out there, and we went and saw her, and my mum stayed in touch with her for years. And then sort of when the paramedics dropped me off at the hospital, they went back for her. Like, they just went back and knocked on her door and just made sure she was okay.
Right.
I think, but that shows, why people do the job they do, right? And that people who kind of job, paramedics, doctors, nurses, they do it because of this innate wanting to help people.
So I'm going to ask the question that everybody else out there in listening land is wanting me to ask you right now, is what happened to the bloke that was in the car and hightailed it out of there and left you there?
Yeah, I know. It didn't end well, that one, because that ended up, as we went through a process of because it was a car accident, so there was the court case and things like that, and it turned out they weren't. I was just working for them. I was just a backpacker, right? He was a manager at Backpackers. And then the owner of the Backpackers as well, and things just didn't work out very well with them in the end. It turned out they weren't the decent kind of true blue Aussies I thought they might have been.
Okay, sinister.
A bit of a shade. Yeah.
Sinister plot.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm glad that Kathy upheld the true Aussie spirit and got you into good hands of care, and we're all so pleased that you're here with us today, of course. And 60 k's to get to the final destination. You didn't have a lot left to do, did you?
No, I've done about 1,000, like over about 18 hours. So it was, and that was all my friends were there, because I'd lived in Early Beach for 5 months, and I literally only left there about 3-4 weeks before. So I'd been there working in the Whitsunday Islands for a backpacker, different backpackers there, doing the usual jobs you do, working in the bar, doing the minibus runs.
Yeah.
And that's where I got a love for scuba diving and the ocean. I used to go on all the yachts out there. I just fell in love with the ocean. Yeah.
So I guess in terms of, let's talk about the emotional impact on this, because I guess when you go through a situation, what you've been through, there's two ways it can go, right? You can either decide and make a decision, okay, I'm going to get on with life and I've got my life ahead of me, or you can go down the rabbit hole. How was it for you in the early days after the accident?
I think it was very early days. Was hospital, Australia, and it's all process stuff, right? So you don't really have a lot of thinking to do. The real thinking comes when you get home, and when you first. Just bear in mind, I've been away for 13 months as well, so I went back to my parents' house, and that's when the realization hits you of what's ahead. But I've always and when I talk now, and I talk about my career and stuff like that, is I think whatever you find yourself in life, I believe, and it's not as simplistic as this, but it kind of can be. There's always the two choices, right? You go one way or you go the other. And for me, I'm not saying it was an easy journey. I'm not saying I had no coping problems along the way. But what I did do very quickly is I decided that I'll put things back on track. And for me, the first thing to put on track was rugby. go back to the rugby club, it wasn't about playing, it was about being part of the setup, being training, the fitness, the social life. And it goes with a rugby club. English rugby clubs have a bit of a reputation for their social life. But it was also what helped keep me on track was friends, friends, family. Because I still remember in Australia, this is pre-mobile phone, pre-internet, when the news spread of the accident, and back then they used to have the phones on the trolleys.
Yep. So
the phone would start ringing, and the nurse would have to bring the trolley out with this massive long extension lead attached to it, and it started off with friends in Australia hearing the news, and then it got back to the UK, and it was friends from the UK, and I still remember it. One of my friends phoned me, and so the nurse brought out the trolley again, and she was just like, "It's another one for you, Dan," and I answered it. It was one of my mates, and he just went. I forget a small swear word, but he said, "Dan, I always said you was a shit driver." And that was big, my mate. He didn't ask how I was.
Oh.
And that's another thing I've always. And then that carried on. My friends, we had our own football team. We built our own football team at home because we used to go to the pub every Friday, and we thought, well, let's have an excuse. Every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we thought, let's have an excuse to go to the pub on a Sunday. Let's play football first. So we had our own football team. And then, so they set up a game for me to raise money. And then my rugby club, with the help of Hicker Reid, my coach, they put on a big game. So he had Hicker's 15, so he brought in some like ex-internationals and like people that he knew. And then my club put out a team as well.
Yeah.
And they had a big fundraiser. And it's that got me through. Yep. And I've always said that it doesn't matter, how dark your life can get sometimes. And people's lives get dark. Friends, you can guarantee, and that's how you know that you'll always get out of dark times, is because you'll always laugh at some stage in a dark day, even if it's for a very split second. A smile will crack on your face, and it's usually a friend that will bring that out of you. Yeah, they'll say something, they'll do something, and they'll just take you from where you are to a new place, and you might go back there, but it's just that glimmer of hope you can see. Yeah, and that's what friends do, right? And they were there for me, they supported me, they nurtured me, and then they were there for me again all through my career, my athletics career. They've been a support.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's all about that camaraderie, isn't it? And there's nothing better than sports when it comes to creating that environment.
100%. You get the camaraderie of the team, which is what attracted me to rugby, that ethos that rugby has. It's a sport for all. There is no position on the pitch that some body shape can't fit. Yeah. And it's also how they nurture, they look after, and there is nobody that's an outcast in rugby. Everyone's looked after, everyone has a place, and I just love that. And that was difficult when I went to athletics, actually, to move from team sport to individual sport. But that's a different story. But it is that camaraderie, and then the friends as well, and family the same, right? So family do, they had their massive part. My mum, my dad, my brother, and my extended family were all part of the journey that I went on, and the journey to recovery, but also the journey to being a professional sports person, because that in itself is no easy journey, and it brings its highs and it brings its lows. Yeah. So all through my life and career, I've had this support network around me.
Yeah, brilliant. Are you still in touch with Hickory?
No, I don't. No, I came. I knew he'd been quite unwell for a while, hadn't he? I know people that aren't in touch with him because I'm not at the same club anymore. I've moved. I live in a different area. But I'm still in very good contact with some of the people that played in my first game. And the same thing again after the accident. Yeah. There's a small group of them that I used. They were a little bit older than me, so they was established. They had families, houses, and I pretty much lived on their couches. Like after rugby training, I'd go around their houses, and back then you used to do the old booze run to France once a month or something like that. And if they'd done a booze run, they'd stocked up on wine. We'd generally have a cheese and wine night, and my mum and dad would get the phone call. I'm round John and Sally's or Nigel and Trudy's again.
Yeah. Come pick me up.
See you today. Yeah. But they were there for me, right? They supported me, they nurtured me, and to them I'm forever grateful.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna get Hickory on the show here, and I'm gonna ask him a few stories about you, because I'm sure he's got a few in the closet that he can bring out and tell me.
The one-armed winger. There was actually a thing. Like, so before my first match, Hicker, he came up to me before I'd actually. So I started training at 6 months. I was back training.
Mm-hmm.
Then I played at about a year. So I had 6 months of training before I even played. And during that period, Hicker did come up to me and he said, "Dan, I love you. You love your rugby." He said, "But it's going to be really tough for you, full contact, able-bodied rugby." And he said, "Have you thought about refereeing or coaching?" And I was like, "Hicker." Right? I said, "I'm a winger." I said, "I don't know the first thing about rugby. My job is to let 14 people do all the work
and score tries." Yeah, exactly.
That's the only thing I know, right? I don't know the rules. I don't know what goes on. And I said, "But most importantly, Hicker, I want to play rugby."
Yeah.
And he did. I mean, I have a video that I play at the start of my presentations. It's my rugby one. You can hear his voice. I'll send you a copy of it. You can hear his voice.
Yeah.
Coaching the squad, and it's quite cool.
Brilliant.
And to know you was coached by an All Black, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not many people can say that around the world. They've been coached by an All Black, that's for sure, and a good one too. He was a great All Black.
One of the most formidable, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he lived with pride in that jersey more than most. So yeah, great guy indeed. Okay, athletics. So how did that come about? How did you get into the professional athletic world?
Well, I'd been an athlete when I was younger, so I'd run when I was younger, but with no aspirations of doing anything with it really, and I wasn't that good. I was okay. I didn't really excel in any way, district champion and stuff like that, but never really got up into any level where someone might say, "Oh, you've got a chance in." But what happened was, because of the rugby, it was televised, it was in all the written press, it was just a feel-good story on a wet, dreary Saturday afternoon. So it made quite a bit of headline news. And then there was somebody who used to look after a section of Paralympic team, the athletics team, the amputee section.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to jokingly call him the ambulance chaser. But if he saw someone that had an inkling of talent, and in the written press, it obviously highlighted that I was a sporty person, and you can see I could run, and he didn't say, "Do you want to be a Paralympian?" It doesn't work like that, right? Paralympics is the highest level. But he said, "Have you ever thought about going back into athletics? I've got a squad. They're amputees. They've all 90% of them have all been to the Paralympics." And I was and my first response was, I said, "Right, so I play rugby. So generally, if we play a rugby match, we hang upside down off the bar and we drink Guinness for our ears. Do we do that in athletics?" And he went, "Not really." I went, "I'm not interested." and then every now and again, he would just drop a line out of the blue. He'd phone me up and he would just say, "We've got a squad weekend coming up. Just fancy?" And I was like, "No." And I was actually at a rugby player's same house where I used to go and stay, and I was at John and Sally's house, and they had it was around New Year. They was having a big get together, so it was all people from the rugby club. Hicker might have even been there, I don't know. We're all round there drinking, and my mobile phone rang, and it was this guy that used to phone me up, and my friend's wife, Sally, had picked my phone up and said, "Oh, your phone's ringing, Dan." And I saw it was this guy, and I went, "Do not answer that phone." So she pressed green straight away. I went, "Oh, it's for you, Dan," like that, because I'd had a few sherbets. I just said, "Look, I'll come to one of your squad weekends and then I'll make a decision." And I went to this squad weekend and I met some athletes that had been to Atlanta in '96.
Yeah.
There was something happened, like just in a conversation about what it meant. And I think what it made me realise was Paralympic sport is not disability, give it a go sport. You've got a disability, what are you doing next weekend? I'll go to the Paralympics, that's a good laugh. These are serious athletes, right? And it was life and death to them. There was one of them that come fourth in Atlanta, and he was, still damaged by that he'd missed out on the bronze medal by a fraction of a second. And it was realising that it was sport, it was professional sport. And I thought, do you know what? And this, with everything I do in life, I made the decision. I thought I'll give it a go. And that's how I approach everything in life. Is I give it a go. What's the worst that'll happen?
Yeah.
So I thought I'll try athletics, and the worst that'll happen is I think after 6 months, you know what? It's not really for me.
Yeah.
I'll go back to rugby, but I'll go back to my rugby fitter, faster, stronger. So I'm going to win at some stage, and if the best that'll happen is I'll engage with it. So I started training with the local training group I trained with when I was younger. And just started working towards the potential of, and all I wanted at first was see if I could get a GB vest. There was no Paralympics in my mind. It was
right.
GB vest, and then I got my first GB vest. I went to the '98 World Athletics Championships, made the final. Never expected to get that far. And came away with 8th in the final. Knocked the guy who came 4th in Atlanta, our other British athlete, knocked him out in the final by 100th of a second, beat his time. So I took the last spot, the fastest loser spot, and then I was 8th in the final. And it was that moment. It was that moment when I thought, right, I've done this with not minimal. I was training hard, but without the commitment that you need. I had the training without the commitment. And I thought, I wonder. It's like 2 years till Sydney. I wonder if I could get a Paralympic vest, and that's when the journey really started for me. I think off that 8th place, I thought, you know, I enjoyed running in a vest and in an international, but the people on the podium have a lot of fun, and I want to be on the podium. And that's when I went through this process that I talk about, which is about from training, like just somebody that trained like an athlete, to becoming an athlete. That was the difference. It was the lifestyle that went with it. And I joined a group of international athletes, a renowned coach. I joined one of our top female British athletes as her training partner. There's a big story around how we came together as well, and that was it. You know, for me, I trained with able-bodied athletes. I wasn't interested in just para athletes. Now I wanted to train with the able-bodied. And it wasn't because I thought I was above or beyond them. It's because for me, the Paralympic movement was still quite new, and the athletes just trained in their own little groups a lot of them. And I just thought, you know, a lot of Paralympic athletes sort of get dropped into it as well. We don't do that apprenticeship that you do in sport. So my able-bodied counterparts would start off in the junior ranks, come up through the ranks, you know, under 20s, under 23s. Then they get their first senior vest, but they're very young when they step onto the senior teams, and then they're nurtured by the older athletes. So they learn, they do an apprenticeship in sport. I had that. I was just a loudmouth Essex boy. So I wanted to for me, it was about being accepted by my counterparts. So the able-bodied ones. So I needed them to know that I was as hard a working athlete. I was a little bit slower than them because I had a bit missing. But I was, in terms of work ethic, it was there. And that was the most important thing. So, you know, training camps we used to go to America, trained in Australia, the Gold Coast, training with all international athletes. I trained with Kathy Freeman. So I wasn't about training, because actually what I was doing was I was learning from these athletes all the time. And that's kind of where the journey started, really. And it just built, and it just went from one stage to the next. And then as soon as I got to the next stage, it was like, right, this is pretty cool. But now if I go to the next level of commitment and dedication, then I may be able to get that ultimate, which is the goal.
I'll tell you what, you've just gone through 100 questions that I had for you, so I'm going to go back to...
Sorry.
I'm going to go back to the beginning of that dialogue that you just gave us for the last 13 minutes, which, by the way, was fantastic.
Sorry, it's just Eddie now,
I'm sitting here thinking what all the audience are going to want me to ask you, right? So the first thing is, what was the name of the guy that kept pestering you on the phone that got you finally into athletics?
Do you know what? It's one of those things you ask me and now it's gone. And I know, it'll come to me because Peter Arnott was his name. And I have since come across him again. And he was very ex-military, so very shouty, very dominant. And of course, a lot of athletes don't always... Whereas I'm a rugby man, I'm used to being shouted at. So for me, it worked. I like, you know... I should have joined the military when I was younger. It would have suited me. Not the fighting bit, but the running around and doing sport. I would love that. And
Army rugby team.
Yeah. The athletic squad and the ski team, and I would have done it purely for sport. He's the one that got me into it, 100%. Yeah, and was that first? He was my first international nurture, I guess. Steering me through.
Well, there's two people in the journey so far. Kathy, who saved your life, and Peter, who changed your life and turned you on down to the path of athletics. That obviously are two people that had a significant impact, mate, on your journey thus far. there's
been a number. I mean, you got the not the whole rugby club as a whole, but then there's that little group that I used to, and I'm still very good friends with. And there was another one, the physiotherapist, who because he's so many points in my life. So firstly, after the accident, he looks after half the England rugby team, football players, international athletes. But he also, at the time, was based out of a rugby club. He's moved on now and he's up in London. But at the time, he used to run a couple of times a week, he would look after a few of the rugby players. And anyway, after my accident, for at least once or twice a week for the first year, he was giving me physio. And it was all under the guise that he was strengthening the arm, ready for me to be able to do sport again. And but actually, many, many, many years later, and then he's a very dedicated physio. Now, when I became an international athlete, and you need him properly, you'd phone him up sometimes, like, Kev, I broke myself again, and he'd be like, all right, come to the house. I'll see you about 1 a.m, right?
Yeah.
And you go to his house at 1 a.m, and he wasn't even there. He was still out treating somebody else. His passion is that strong. And sometimes you go to the clinic, and your appointment was 11:30, and you wouldn't get seen till 3:30 in the afternoon. He's 4 hours late. He's always known for being late.
Right.
But you accept it because you know he's running late because he's fitted in a load of other athletes that really need him.
Yeah.
So it's not like anyone would ever get annoyed with him because it's like, because you're one of them athletes sometimes that gets fitted in.
Yeah.
And he had this under this impression that he was looking after my arm. Many years later, he admitted it was nothing to do with that. It was about watching me, seeing how I was reacting, because he knew I wasn't the kind of guy that would ever open up.
Yeah.
So he had to do it. And then he I still remember on the day of that first ever rugby match, he took me into the opposition dressing room. He walked me into the opposition dressing room because there was TV cameras there and everything. And he went, look, you know what the match is all about today. You're playing against Danny. He said, I'd just like to let you know that he's fit, fast and strong. So if you don't hit him, you don't tackle him, he will score a try. And I remember just looking at Kevin and going, and that's supposed to help me how, right?
What a mate to have. What a mate to have, eh?
But he nurtured me then, and then also he put me together with my training partner, Donna Fraser, and my coach, Ao Falola, because he looked after Donna.
Right.
And he once again stepped in then and asked Ao, so I was training at my local club, and he asked Ao if Ao would help me.
Yeah.
Because I'd become 8th in the Worlds, and I was now working towards Sydney, and we just come in the physio surgery together at the same time, and he said, Ao, look, Danny's on a journey. Would you be able to assist him and help him? And that started that relationship with Ao and Donna. So that was Kevin again.
Now, I'm not a athletic aficionado, but Donna Fraser was 4th, I think, in the 400 metres in Sydney. Is that right?
Yes, she was. Yeah, in the Kathy Freeman race. Yeah, the big race, the big four.
There you go. So let's talk about Sydney, and let's talk about the build-up, because what's it like to get a phone call to say you're on Team GB, you're going to go to the Paralympics? Do you get a phone call, or is it an email or a text message, or what is it?
I think nowadays you get WhatsApp probably, but or an Insta nowadays. But back then you got a phone call, and it was like, congratulations, you've made the team. And of course later on in my career, you knew you had a better chance of being on a team, but in the first instance, you never know. Like your first ones, you don't know, and you get that phone call to say you've made it. And it's like the thing with sport though is once you get that call, that comes a number of months before the games, and just like any sporting championships, like be it rugby, football, World Cups, Euros, and you've got to get through the neck. You then have that nervous bit between finding out and going, because sport can be cruel. We know that, and things go wrong. And you have all the niggles and the tweaks and the injuries and the illnesses in the period, and that's just such a nervous time for any athlete. Filled with excitement. First Paralympic Games. Australia. I mean, what else? It couldn't have gone any better. Fly out to the Gold Coast is the holding camp. Then down to Sydney for the games. The race didn't quite go as well as I'd hoped, but the whole experience was that eye-opening. Wow.
It's a shame they didn't put your Team GB in the middle of the desert for the holding camp. I think the Aussies could have stitched you guys up there instead of putting you on the beautiful Gold Coast, yeah?
Yeah. We would have had a clue.
So, a lot of people want to know about what it's like going to, the Olympics and all the rest of it. But how does the emotion of, getting on that plane and flying out with all those other, comrades and looking at how you're going to set your own expectations? Did you put a lot of expectation on yourself to achieve a certain result?
By that stage, I'd actually really started to come good in my sport in the 400, and I was in medal contention. It wasn't necessarily I was going out for gold. There was a damned Australian called Heath Francis who had a much faster time than me, and but but I went out there with expectation to win a medal, and but most importantly, it was my first game, so there was expectation, but there was more excitement than expectation. So your first one is like wide-eyed, and it's because you don't know what's coming, right? And you want to take everything in, and everything's exciting, and you're just trying to control your excitement and your nerves. And so the holding camp is amazing, and they go, no stone is left unturned for the preparation of the athletes, especially the big teams like GB, Australia, Canada, America, but then you go down to the village, and that's when it suddenly hits you. And I remember actually being a little bit cheeky. We on the day of the opening ceremony, me and a well-known Paralympian Tanni Gray-Thompson here in the UK, Dane Tanni Gray-Thompson, and a couple of others sneaked into the stadium day of the opening, before the opening ceremony. Yeah. And day before the opening ceremony, sorry, we sneaked into the stadium. Don't know how we got in actually. Yeah. And I've got pictures of us in there, and that was the first moment, because you looked around that 110,000 seater stadium, empty, and it looked massive. And that was the first moment I was like, "Oh, what have I got myself into?" Yeah. Yeah. But it's a really strange environment. Your best friends can become your enemies because of the way we all deal with pressure. Some people, I get very insular. So in my early days, I had to conform. As I became a seasoned athlete with the GB team, and I had a little bit more say in how I prepared, I used to get my own room a lot of the time, because Danny doesn't play well with others, right? So I do, but it's just I go quite insular when I'm nervous. I need to be quiet and just shut myself away.
Either that or in a bar. You probably
I had that all gone by that stage. That was new me.
So there's a lot of naive people out there listening and watching the show today, and I'm one of them. So how does the categorization work for the disability classes in your case?
Yeah, so that's the thing with Paralympic sport. It gets quite complex with classifications. And so we have 5 main ones. We have visually impaired. We have, it's not as simple as this, but if you keep it simple, visually impaired, cerebral palsy. Then we have the amputee section. We have, I'm missing a few now. What have I got? Amputees, visually impaired, cerebral palsy.
Is there
I don't even know. I work in television, right? So,
is there a deaf one for deaf people?
No, there's not. No? It'll come to me in a minute. I do know them. So, but in my category, the amputees, it's fairly. Oh, we've got the wheelchair racers as well. We've got you've got arm amputees, leg amputees, and you've got single, doubles. But it's pretty much what you see is what you get, right?
Okay.
It's a visual disability. You can see what it is.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the spinal injuries and the cerebral palsy, you can't see, how the disability affects the athlete until they start running. Whereas with us, you've lost an arm. The thing back then, arm amputee was arm amputee. So from losing a hand all the way through to having no arms, although we had different numbers, we all raced in the same group.
Right.
So there was different levels, and so I was fairly high level because I had a complete arm missing. Some had just the hand missing that I'd raced against. But that's my category. It's called T46.
Yep.
Just meant arm amputee. That was it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for explaining that, because it's always one of those things when we do watch the Paralympics that gets a bit confusing, and you've broken it down nicely there, so well done. And I'll tell your producers on your TV show that you gave me all the right answers. Yeah. So what happened in Sydney? What happened in your competition? And how was that whole environment of that stadium on game day?
I mean, the stadium was phenomenal, and so in terms of like just the noise, and it's something I'd never experienced before. In terms of competition, I got through to the final of the 400. That was my main event. I still used to do the 200 back then, but the 4 was my main event. Got through to the final. In the final, I remember coming out into the stadium, and I remember my mind just being all over the place. It was just bouncing everywhere, and I just couldn't get focused and in the zone. And they do the intros to you on the track, which is, I always talk about, like, if you're not nervous by this stage, when they put the camera in front of your face and they introduce you to the crowd and you see yourself up on jumbo screens around, that's the bit that will get you if you're not already nervous. And I remember standing there, and it's like, and it was in lane 5, representing Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Danny Crates, and I looked up, and I remember standing there going, wow, those shorts look flary. And I knew I wasn't in a good place. And then the gun went, and we had a false start. Luckily, not me. And there's 2 things in a 400 when you have a false start, because you've gone about 50 metres by the time the second gun's gone and you stop running. There's 2 things that go through your head. One, I've just done 50 metres. I'm not getting that back. Right? So now we're racing 450 metres. So no one told us that. I'm prepared for that one. And then secondly, most importantly, I thought I can refocus. And I just didn't manage it. And I actually took off too slow. 400 is about pacing and running your own race. You can't be influenced by anybody else. And it is down to probably less than a quarter of a second every 50 metres. You've got to be within your target. I'd say less than a quarter of a second. It's that precise. And I was just too slow out of the blocks. So by the time I hit the back straight, I realised I was in trouble. Then I started overcooking it a little bit, trying to catch people up. And then on the home straight, just didn't have anything left. Came third in the world, right? Not bad.
Right. For a bad performance.
But what goes with that is, yes, you've got the bronze medal, and it wasn't that I thought I could win the gold. On that day, I could have, because the Australian had been injured in the build-up to it, so he wasn't in his best form. He went on to achieve amazing things over the 4 and the 2. But that day could have been my day to win the gold. And I made about a quarter of a second's worth of mistakes in the early part of the race, which cost me the race. But it was 0.22 of a second, gold, silver, bronze. It was that close.
Wow.
3 of us crossed that finish line. So you get the medal, and then you've got everybody, all the excitement. My family were out there, friends had come out as well. And they're all excited for you because you won the bronze medal. But inside you're hurting because you know that you got it wrong. And that was the fuel, right? And I still play it when I do my talks. I play that race, and it's brilliant. You get the commentators who I then built up a really good relationship with over the years. But then there's the co-commentator on this guy by the name of John Ridgeon, and he was a British 4 hurdler, and he's the co-commentator on the race. And he's the one that sort of analyses the stuff that people don't see. And that's what I do now. And he was brilliant. He tore me apart in the commentary.
Right.
It's like he went off too slow. He was under pressure. His technique fell apart. He was. And actually, people watching it, because when I come back on stage and I'm talking, I go, "Don't you love a commentator?" And everyone kills themselves laughing.
Did you buy him a beer? Did you buy him a beer afterwards? No.
I've since spoken to him because we're in the similar fields of work and stuff like that. And I've said, I still remember that you tore me apart. But he was right. And why would a commentator do disservice to a disabled athlete by saying, but he didn't quite get what he wanted, but he gave it a go. No, he knew what he wanted. So he told it as it was. I messed up the race, and I could have, if I got the race right, I would have won the race. But that is what spurred me on. And sometimes we need these things in our life to just give us that jump start to really focus. Absolutely.
Hey, I was going through a bit of a checklist before you came on the show today to see how many things we've got in common. You've hung out with an All Black. I've done that as well.
Tick.
You've been a runner. I've done that as well. But we both went to the Athens Olympic Games, and
wow.
You were there as a athlete, and I was there as a professional spectator, predominantly spending most of my times in the bars around Athens. But during the day and the evening. I got out to the Olympic Stadium in the middle of nowhere, as it was in Athens, and got to see you guys do your stuff. So what happened in Athens for you? You changed your discipline. You went to a longer distance.
Yeah, so off the back of Sydney, because athletes have different strengths, and that's how like I was put together with Donna. So Donna was phenomenally fast, and she didn't lack strength, but she didn't have, you know, she's a female athlete. She was a professional full-time athlete. Would go to America training and Australia training for long periods of time. You're not going to find many, but there's no other women in the UK that keep up with her. So, and then she can't run with the guys, so it's finding a training partner is difficult. And then so I met AO, and AO at the time I wasn't good enough. I was mentally, I wasn't the right person. Not I wasn't all over the place, but you know, to be a full-time athlete is a big commitment. And AO didn't know if I had that. So when I first met AO, he didn't say, "Yeah, come and join my training group." He said, "Right, this is where you are now. This is where I want you to get to." And he gave me some tools and some stuff to take away. And he said, "You know, give us a shout when you get to this point." And I got to that point exactly. And I went back to him, and when he knew that actually I could be a committed athlete, he put me and Donna together. But I think it was a perfect partnership. You had Donna, who had immense speed, and you have me, who didn't have so much speed, but I had immense strength. So in training, when we're doing the long, arduous training sessions, I could drag Donna around the track.
Yep.
When we're doing the speed training sessions, I'll towed along by Donna. So you had this perfect partnership. So then when I get to Athens, the change, so after the back of Sydney, because I was a strength athlete, AO, I was doing more strength-based training. That's how I ran the 400 metres, just almost flat out for me, but hard. Whereas other athletes were quicker than me, so they could be a little bit slower. Through the first 200, have more in the tank. Whereas I was flat out. I had no more speed. And so we started looking at the longer distance training, and because I started to do really well with that, AO just said, "Have a look at let's try an 8. What's the worst that'll happen, right?" And I remember I did an 800 in an open meeting in the UK. Stood on the start line, turned to the guy next to me. A lot of people used to know me, right? And I turned to the guy next to me. I went, "So what happened in the 8 then?" And he went, "Well, you're going to get to the bell," and he said, "You'll be way under your top speed." So he said, "You'll be laughing at this stage." He said, "You'll get to 600.
Yeah.
And he said, "You'll still feel okay, probably. You'll probably think you're going to win this race."
Yeah.
He said, "When you get down to the 700 metre mark," he said, "then wheels are going to fall off and you're going to wish you never started." The race unfolded as he said, but I got to the 700 and I felt okay.
Yeah.
And it just felt right. And that's when we started switching me from a 4 to an 8 run. It took 2 years to do the change.
Right.
You can't just change it.
Yeah.
But I switched from the 4 to the 8, and I went to the Athens Games as an 800 metre runner. But I also had all that learning behind me, another 4 years of training with international athletes.
Yep.
I was a much more committed, dedicated athlete.
Yep.
But with that came pressure.
Yeah, of course.
I was a record holder at the time.
Yeah.
And we're funded athletes in the UK, so you know we're public property, and if
Yeah.
we don't perform,
Yeah.
we lose our funding. And I went to those games with a massive expectation on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'd learned to deal with that kind of pressure, expectation. The biggest expectation is the one we put on ourselves, though, right? That pressure we put on ourselves. But Athens was a different game. There was no more wide-eyed first games. For me, Athens was business. For me, sport was a business, and it was about performing at the right time.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I got it right, and it came good.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that's something to share with people that are listening today who are on that journey and they want to get to the Olympics, that first games experience is something really, really important, isn't it, to prepare you and to find out who you really are? You've talked a lot about, you found out who you really were in Sydney, right? You had those experiences.
Yeah. And
you came out a changed man when it was time to go to Athens to do the business, as you talk about.
Yeah, because in Sydney I found out that actually, it's not that I didn't want the bronze and I didn't belittle that. If I had run the perfect race and actually come away with a bronze medal, I would have been happy. Yeah. But I didn't even run a personal best. So that's the one thing you've got to expect to do at games, is especially in the 400, which is an 8's very different. It's tactical.
Yeah.
But anything 1, the 2, the 4, you'd expect to be in the best shape of your career at the major championships. It doesn't always happen because things happen, stop illness. But if you're in good shape, then the only thing that stops you from not doing it is your underperformance. So I knew that I'd made the mistakes in Sydney and I didn't win the race. That's what hurt, not the medal. Going to Athens, completely different. But it's why often at championships, you often take young athletes to championships without the expectation on their shoulders to win the medals. You don't often take them to the Paralympic Games, but you're taken to Europeans, or if there's a Worlds at home or a close to home one, you might take them to that. You kind of blood the athlete. Yeah. Let them have their first experience of major games because it's like nothing they'll ever experienced before.
Yeah.
The build up to the race, the preparation, the warm up track. I mean, you warm up on the track next door to the track, right? So you're out on a track that's within throwing distance of the main stadium generally, and you can hear the stadium going off. Like if you've got a big games like Athens and Sydney, like the crowd is going bonkers. And you're not even started your preparation, and you've got your teammates like some are coming back from the track, floods of tears where they feel like their whole world has fallen apart. Others come back bouncing off the walls; they've exceeded all expectation. They want to tell you about their experience, and you're just hiding under a coat waiting to start your preparation. But the other 7 athletes you're going to race also on the same track, warming up, doing the whole showmanship and eyeballing and peacock walking and whatever else athletes do. It's all going on, and you've got to learn to cope with all of this stuff. And that's why you go to your first championships. And whereas Athens was different. Athens was about focus and was about delivering and performing. But then, of course, you have a different scenario because you'll never get to the. You've got to get through the heats, right, to get to the final. And especially in an 8, so much can go wrong. You get tripped over, you can get knocked out of lane, you could break too early on the break of 100 metres and get disqualified. You could trip someone else up and get disqualified. And then you can't even fight for a medal if you don't make the final. So I always found the biggest pressure in the internationals was the heats.
Hang on, I've got it. So, Danny, I've got a question for you around Sydney and that amazing race that you're in there. What was your time?
In the Sydney one?
Yeah, in the Sydney 400.
50.23.
50.23. That's what I ran to go down to the mailbox this morning, and it's only 100 metres to my mailbox, so 50.23. Wow. So you guys are not that much slower than the able-bodied guys, really, are you? You know, that's within shouting. That's within shouting distance. That is, yeah.
And I think we get closer the longer the distance. With the power at length, like losing an arm, you lose a lot. You don't. It's not only the ability when you're running, because your arms are big stabilizers, right? So if my arms aren't there, your arms are the driving. You know, you're powering with your arms as well.
Yeah.
And they're stabilizing you. So if they're not stabilizing you, then your back is doing all the work. So then my back's doing a load of extra work to stabilize me. But it's also the training. I couldn't lift the weights. I couldn't do the stuff that I need to do to be able to get stronger. And when we get up to the 8s and the 15s, I think we get a little bit closer to the everybody else. But that 50.23 was. I was always, an athlete's always destined to go fast. You never hear an athlete that says, I ran my fastest ever time. They're always like, and I was a sub 50 runner. Well, I wasn't, so I didn't do it. But Donna went sub 50 in Sydney 4 weeks before me.
Right.
We'd both never done it before. And me and Donna, we're always in competition with each other. We used to see who could hold their breath the longest in the jacuzzis. We even had, right, we'd never be in the room together, by the way. It wasn't just me and Donna, it was the whole training room. We'd even have competitions when we were away in America training. Who could wee the longest? Right? So someone would be outside the toilet timing it, right? There was nothing that wasn't a competition. Who could lose the most weight? Who could crazy golf? We used to get very competitive.
Yeah.
We got banned from going go-karting. We got too competitive. And we had this competition, like first one to go sub 50, and Donna beat me to it.
Well, you know? I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to get Hicka Reid on the show and Donna Fraser on the show now.
Yeah.
I had Catherine Merry on the show. Do you know Catherine very much?
Yeah, I work with Catherine, and Catherine very, very regularly reminds me she had a faster 400-metre time than me. Because if we get into it on air normally, it's always about she got the bronze and I got the gold.
Right.
And then, but Catherine's very quick-witted, and you're a fool to take Catherine Merry on in a war of words. And I've been stupid enough and naive enough to go at it a few times. And yeah, she's very quick to come back with her personal best, which is quicker than mine.
Good on you. So after Athens and you did the amazing event in the 800, did you pick up the phone and start having a chat to David Rudisha and get some tips from him? Was that on your on your speed dial? Was it?
I mean, he runs the 8 like you're not supposed to, because that's the thing with the 8, right? When you first start running the 800, and when I did that first open one, right? Whenever you get a new person on the track, an 800 metre run, it's kind of like all the other athletes go, "We got a new one. Right, this idiot's going to go off he always goes off too fast, and then he'll blow up."
Yeah.
And then we'll just go past him as a pack and wave as we go past. and that's what the 8's like, right? You very rarely run an 8 from the front, unless you're David Rudisha.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just runs it gutsy, eyeballs. He runs it like the Americans would run it, right? They can't run 8s. They go out like a tornado and then blow up. Yeah. Generally.
Yeah.
But he actually manages to keep it going.
Nick Simmons comes to mind as one of those.
Who?
Nick Simmons.
Yes,
you remember Nick Simmons? He used to go off like a cut cat, didn't he, in the beginning, and never held it to the end.
It's because the Americans don't. They do 1 to 4, don't they? Really, and it's power, it's speed. And I think if you didn't make the 400 metres, you get chucked in the 8. Yeah. Because they think it's quite simple. It's just. But for me, and that's what I was. But what I was really good at in the 8 was tactical running. I had the ability to control the race, and that's what I had a natural ability to do, was controlling the race, getting the other athletes to do what I wanted them to do. Yep. Doesn't mean I could always guarantee that would happen, so I had to prepare all different ways to win. Right. But what I did manage on multiple occasions, so what I used to do was slow the race. I'd get out to the front, because I could get out to the front, so I had the speed. A lot of my athletes that I've raced against were longer distance, like 1,500 metre runners. Yep. So they relied on their endurance, whereas I relied on power and the speed. So I'd get out first, get away from the gun, slow it down at the first 100 metres when we broke, and hold it, and then I'd usually let someone on my shoulder, so I'd create a wall. Yep. And then just hold the race back, because I knew that if I was within my ability, by the time we got to 400 metres, if anyone went, then I'm within my power, like within my speed, and I could then sprint for as long as I needed to. Right. And that's what I used to do, and I managed it on multiple occasions. Not every, most occasions, and luckily managed it in Athens.
Fantastic. Great to get an insight from an athlete on how they actually controlled a race. That's great to share. We've rushed through our time today, but before you go, I've got to get you on a couple of things, because it's really important, I think, to understand you've been involved in the sport a long time. You're now behind the microphone doing a lot of stuff as well. How's the progression of the Paralympics in particular gone over the last 20 years? How have you seen the world become more connected to what's going on with the Paralympic movement, and what still needs to be done in your eyes in that space?
I think Sydney was the first big step forward we had, was when the world really woke up to Paralympic sport. Before that, we, like in the UK, we'd get a 1.5 hour highlights show 6 months after the event, right? So, but Sydney, because it was the first big global one that it was always at the major games, but it was the first one where Sydney had actually taken the Paralympics like seriously and said, we're going to put on a show. So Sydney was the open, for me, was the eye opener. Some people would say the one before, Barcelona, wasn't it? Barcelona before? Yeah. Yep. And possibly. But I think it was Sydney. And then we went into Athens. Athens was mixed bag. London set the world alight. And you would just say that because of, in terms of Paralympic sport. But I think it's because London is so well connected with Europe that we had the crowds. And 80, like in the athletics stadium, 80,000 people twice a day. Crazy at a Paralympic, but no one's ever seen that. I think personally we stepped back a little bit after that. We didn't manage to keep that momentum going. And it still has the disparity in Paralympic sport. You get some events that are really strong. You get some that they just do not have the depth of athletes to make it a strong enough event. We're going to get that, and then you're still going to have a bit within Paralympic sport where within a category you might have someone who's less disabled than somebody. Than you have the spectrum, but it's the way Paralympic sport works, where you've got some people at the very higher end of the disability and some people at the very lower end of it, and it's difficult, to analyse that, but it's the only way it works. But I do think that it's come a long way. London 2012 made global superstars out of Paralympic athletes. And we'd only ever seen one of them before, and we know what happened to him. But now we'd only ever focused on, I don't know why, but they'd only ever focused on one person, right? Turned him into an icon, whereas there's lots of them phenomenal athletes in the Paralympic movement, and now we had loads of people, and it just introduced the world. And you had, like, working at those games, you'd hear kids that didn't have a disability talking about how they wanted to be a Blade Runner, or they wanted to be like David Weir, the Werewolf of London. They wanted to be Paralympic athletes, and that for me was just like, wow, that's a turning point.
So what piece of advice would you give to a young girl or boy who's out there listening or watching the show today, and they're having a dream about making it to the Olympic Games? What's perhaps one of the best things you've ever been told by somebody else, or something you can share from your own advice on that journey?
I think it's have the dream is the first place, right? Never be told that you can't achieve something. Always be mindful and realistic of stuff. You've got to be realistic of it, right? Of what the possibilities are, but it doesn't mean you stop the dream. And it's about being prepared to put in the work, put in the training. And I've always said, like, for every successful, famous person, like Michael Phelps, swimmer, Roger Federer, you look at, the list goes on. It doesn't have to be sport as well. But if you look at these people, what is it that makes them successful? And Johnny Wilkinson, rugby for us in the UK, and blah, 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 in England, sorry. I think there's 10 that could have done it better, right? There always is. But out of those 10, some are lost to circumstance in life, because life can be like that sometimes. Things come along. But many are lost, because when it gets tough, they step back, they walk away. And there's anyone of a club going age will have friends that will tell them till they're blue in the face what they could have been. Oh, that company that sold for $5 billion? I had that idea. Yeah. Oh, that Michael Phelps, I beat him at high school, man. I used to smash him at high school. What happened then, mate? And there's lots of them. We've all got them friends that tell you till they're blue in the face what they could have been. Me personally, I'd rather tell people what I tried to be. Failed miserably at it, learned a lot doing it. Yeah. Gave it a go. And I think that'd probably be my advice. Never be scared to try something new, because I tried athletics, right? Yeah, absolutely. I tried rugby, and both of those became career-defining sports for me. Yeah. So never be scared to try something new. And if you're going to try something new, especially when I'm talking to young people, right, take a mate along with you. Yeah. Take a friend, because they might latch into it as well. And if it's somebody who's already on that journey, already on that career path, then I think we often talk about the sacrifices that sports people make. I missed all my friends' weddings, birth of their children parties, all the boys' holidays to Ibiza. I missed all them. Yeah. I don't ever call them sacrifices. They would never sacrifice me. They were a life choice. Yeah. And if you see you can see all the people in the background. This is like canvas was done for me. It's brilliant. Here, they were all my friends and family, right? And I had over 30 friends and family out in Athens. So all the things I've missed for them, and I didn't even know they were going, right? It was a surprise. They turned up. That shows that they bought into the journey as well. So it's, just be prepared. It's going to be a tough journey. It'll never be easy. It's not meant to be easy, but it is filled with reward. Brilliant way to finish up. But I do have one last question that's just come into my head, and I thought I've got to ask him a rugby question before we finish today. So, what's your take on an Australian coaching the English rugby team at the moment? Well, at the moment, I think not too great. You want to send them back home, dude? Do you want to send them back home? I think so, yeah. It's a job and it's money, right? But I don't know how they do it sometimes. Working with a national team, in the league system, but how you can go and coach a squad that is going to go against your home nation, it must take some sort of, you've got to be able to compartmentalise your thinking process sometimes, haven't you? But at the minute, and I'm not one to chuck people out just because things go wrong, but at the moment, you can have him back.
Yeah, they can, these Aussies, can't they? They can, yeah. No, but as a Kiwi, I'm happy that he's there, and keep him there as long as keep him there as long as you want.
I didn't mean you can have him back. I meant like where you are.
Danny, listen, it's been fantastic having you on the show today, and really enjoyed it. And thanks for everything. Thanks for inspiring a lot of people around the world. Thank you for your commitment to your sport, and also thanks to Kathy, who made it possible. We got to go back to that and thank her. But it's been a blast, and hope we catch up sometime for a pint or two when I come over your way.
Perfect. I like the sound of that. Cheers.
There we go. Danny Crates coming live to us from the UK today. Fantastic guy. Hope you enjoyed that chat. It was good to get the insight, wasn't it, from a Paralympian, and how he used to prepare, and some of the things that he learnt, well, a lot of lessons that he learnt along the way. And it's great to hear that Danny's such a positive character after a pretty horrendous accident, as you would have all heard during that episode. I'd like to really thank you all for listening to the Global Sports Channel and tuning in on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. You know that it makes a lot of difference when you do that, and hit the little notification bell and you'll be notified every time that we drop a new video. I'm standing in today for Tasha Danvers, our bronze medal Olympian who usually does this show. And Tasha will be back again soon with another show for you from the Global Sports Channel. Until then, I wish you all a very happy day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.